Hi guys, it's Mark Zickery, Mr. Sci-Fi, and I've been doing some rejiggering of my bookshelves, which will be continuing over the next few days. But I wanted to share some things with you that are very dear to me, and I had mentioned that I was going to do a video on why I love signed copies of books, signed by the author, and I have a few examples here, and again, a lot of people collect for different reasons. Some people are just readers, and it doesn't matter what edition it is, doesn't matter if it's signed, and that's fine because the contents, for the most part, remain the same. But some of us love the connection that a book that's signed by its author or a first edition brings. The thought, for instance, that you're holding a first edition of Huckleberry Finn or David Copperfield or whatever, and that you can be one with the person who bought it originally back in Victorian times and so forth. So these are some of I've always loved signed books since I was a kid. And because I live in LA, because I go to science fiction conventions and signings and so forth, and got to know a lot of science fiction writers, these are just some that are in my collection, a very small percentage. And but also sometimes the book is associated with a memory. So it might be a friend that you had who was a writer, or a time that you met one of your idols, or sometimes it could be a writer that you never met, but there's something about the signature or the association with the copy that lends it a certain coolness. And so here's a couple that illustrate that. This is Islands in the Sky by Arthur C. Clarke, and I didn't ever meet Arthur C. Clarke, sadly, but this is signed by him. And what I was told is that when you visited his house in Sri Lanka, he would reach onto his bookshelf and he would give you one of his personal books, and here is his address stamp. So it would be signed and addressed, Sir Arthur C. Clarke, number 25 Barnes Place, Colombo 7, Sri Lanka. And so this is just a really cool book that connects me to Arthur C. Clarke and connects me to where he lived in the latter part of his life, and really cool. And then, for instance, also somewhere in here, let me see if I can find it. Yes. So this is the first edition of Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, and that's Arthur C. Clarke when he wrote it. And this one has a bookmark signed by Arthur C. Clarke and his business card with his agent's information on the back. So again, it's just very, very cool to think of him writing this great book, and and so forth. So now I think many of you know, who are fans of Mr. Sci-Fi, know that for over a decade I was very good friends with Ray Bradbury, and I would go to his house about once a month, and we'd just talk about life and career and art and all of those things. And I would always bring one of his books with me to sign. And also often he would have a new book or an old book or something that he would want to give me as well. So this is the first edition of Fahrenheit 451. And this is Ray when he wrote it in 1953. And he wrote Mark, Love, Ray Bradbury. And then over here is first edition Martian Chronicles. And again, Ray signed it to me. And, Mark, Mad Love, Ray Bradbury, and he dated it. Now, sometimes he would, write something really, really fun. So let me see if I can find it. It should be up here. Let's see if it's this copy. Yes. So here's Dandelion Wine, which is based strongly on his memories of his childhood in Waukegan. And he wrote, Mark, this dandelion is for you. And he drew a dandelion because it's dandelion wine. So, really, really neat. And so let me show you some other cool books while we're at it. So one of my favorite books is To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, this is the first book club edition that came out when the book came out, I think in 60 or 61. Let me see when 1960. Now, the first edition of To Kill a Mockingbird is the only edition that had Harper Lee's photo on the back. And because once it became such a big hit, she didn't want people to know what she looked like, so she had her picture taken off the book. This is a photo of her taken by her good friend Truman Capote, who she grew up with, and the character of Dill in To Kill a Mockingbird is based on Truman Capote. So there's a really amazing connection with this copy of this book. But the fun part is that at the time, Harper Lee was renowned for not signing books, she was fairly reclusive. But my friend Michael Reeves, who first brought me into TV and was a very dear friend of mine, still is, his family came from Monroeville, Alabama. And I found out that that was the same town that Harper Lee lived in. And I realized that if I wrote Harper Lee, care of Monroeville, Alabama, everyone there would know her and it would get to her. So I wrote her a letter explaining that I was a writer, explaining how much her work had meant to me, and I asked if I could send a copy of the book. And she wrote back in her own hand and said, definitely send the book. So this is to Mark Scott Zickery, best wishes, Harper Lee. Isn't that cool? So now we were mentioning Michael Reeves. Now Michael also co-wrote this book with Neil Gaiman. Now so Michael signed it to me, and then when I did the Twilight Zone Blu-ray, when I produced those and did 52 commentaries, I invited Neil Gaiman to do 2-episode commentaries with me. And so Michael signed the book to me on one side, and Neil signed it to me on the other. And Neil wrote, "Mark, it's so cool to be doing this," Neil Gaiman. And that's because we were recording audio commentaries for Twilight Zone. Now, another friend of mine and mentor was Theodore Sturgeon, who I first met when I was a teenager. And he was a huge idol of mine and a great mentor and friend. And so he signed this book. Although he was a science fiction writer, he wrote for Star Trek, wrote great novels and short stories. This is a book of Westerns that he wrote, of Western stories. And so when I knew Ted, he had a little boy named Andros. So this was signed by Ted Sturgeon and his son Andros, who was about maybe 3 or 4 at the time. So again, this brings back those memories of being in Ted's house and, hanging out with Andros. And we actually looked after Andros for a weekend back then. Andros, of course, is now grown with a family of his own. Now this, Joe Haldeman, this is The Forever War. It won the Hugo for Best Novel, and that's Joe Haldeman. And he was one of my teachers at the Clarion Writers Workshop. So this is his great book, and inside is one of his Christmas letters that he and Gay write that gives an update on them each year, that's sent to me every Christmas. And then it says to Mark Zickery, Joe Haldeman. And so again, these are very dear to me and meaningful. And again, I've been so lucky to know these wonderful people and these wonderful writers. They've been great inspirations and very dear people, and they're why I'm a writer now. And then I started reading the Expanse novels before it was ever a TV show. And then my friend Mark Fergus and his partner Hawk Ostby optioned the Expanse books and turned them into a TV show, which they're executive producers on. And the 2 writers who write under the name James S.A. Corey, they were appearing at a science event and that I was invited to. So I brought the book, and they were kind enough to sign it to me. So again, this just kind of personalizes it all. Now, as I said earlier, in some cases you don't know the writers, but the books are so meaningful to you, and there's a connection. So, for instance, this is Who Goes There, and it's by John W. Campbell, who was for many, many decades the editor of Astounding Science Fiction, really changed the nature of science fiction, but he was also a short story writer and a novelist. And he wrote this novella called Who Goes There, which was made into a movie called The Thing, and it was made in the 50s, a very good version, and then it was made into a great film by John Carpenter in the 80s. So, but also here's another connection. Ray Bradbury was friends with an artist who went by the artistic name, nom de plume, of Hannes Bach, and he was a very interesting artist. And when Ray first went to New York, he brought a portfolio of Hannes Bach's artwork and met with all these different publishers to get Hannes Bach assignments. And this is one of these covers that he did, which is one of the great science fiction covers of all time. And here's the back of it, just gorgeous work. And so this copy, Elaine got me this. This is signed by John W. Campbell, and so there's his signature. And again, it's just so cool to have this book, and it's a first edition. So for the first edition, I got John Campbell's signature. But then when the movie came out in the 50s, they did a movie tie-in edition. If you've seen the motion picture, you'll want to read about The Thing from Another World. So here's this copy, and I heard that John, the director of the film was going to be, doing a signing. So I brought this with me, and John Carpenter signed it, and that's his signature. A little illegible, but still wonderful to have one copy signed by the writer and one copy signed by the director of the film. And if I ever run into Kurt Russell, I'll probably get him to sign one of these or both of these or whatever. So now also another film I love from the 50s is This Island Earth. And it was originally published as a novel by Raymond F. Jones. It was published as a novel first, then made into a very fun science fiction movie. And I found on eBay this copy, with kindest regards, Raymond F. Jones. So although I never met this author, it was super fun to get that copy. Now, sometimes you get a signed copy that is the creme de la creme. Now, I've mentioned previously that I'm a huge fan of the British radio show Journey into Space, and Charles Chilton, the writer, producer, did 2 novels based on his radio plays, because back then, unless you recorded them on a rudimentary, reel-to-reel tape or something, you couldn't listen to them again. So this was his way of, for fans to be able to enjoy the stories again. So this copy, which I found on eBay, not only is signed by Charles Chilton, but the entire lead cast of the radio show. So this is just incredibly rare and wonderful for a fan of the show. And then finally, and these are just sort of books I pulled out at random from my collection, this is the novel Logan's Run. Now, my friend George Clayton Johnson, who wrote for Twilight Zone and Star Trek, and his friend William F. Nolan, they were both part of the whole circle of writers that Charles Beaumont was the center of, they decided that they were going to write a science fiction novel, but sell it to a big publisher and sell it to the movies for $100,000, which at that point was a huge amount of money. I mean, science fiction novels were maybe getting 1,000, 3,000 for novels, but they decided to do it differently, and they succeeded. And this is Logan's Run, and it was made into a movie, and it's been very renowned. And so both George Clayton Johnson and Bill Nolan signed it to me, and I'll show you. Let's see, George's signature. Let's see, so it's Bill Nolan, and where did George sign? His signature's in here somewhere, but but anyway, but they both signed it to me, so it's just really, really, really fun, and just to have this connection with the people that you care about, the people that you know, is so wonderful. And here's the back of that cover. But this is just a small number of books and that I have that are signed by friends. I mean, here's I Am Legend, the first edition, signed by Richard Matheson. That's when he looked like when he was young, pre-beard. And here's Hell's Pavement, signed by Damon Knight, another of my teachers at Clarion. And let's see, and then up here is Memos from Purgatory, and I won't open it up, but it's signed by Harlan, one of the great inspirations of my life and a friend and mentor. And again, it was so fun to be able to get that book signed by someone I so admired. So that's a little bit of it. That's some of it. I'll be doing another Mr. Sci-Fi soon, where I'll talk about why I love first editions, and I'll show you some of the first editions in my collection. But for now, that's just a little tour of some of these cool things. And all of these books I can recommend. All of them you can find on eBay and Amazon. And, sometimes, surprisingly, signed books are not that expensive. And so if you search them out, you can find copies, and sometimes they're even what are called association copies. So, for instance, because of my career, any of these books would be called an association copy, meaning that it's meaningful because not only of who signed it, but who it was signed to. And so, for instance, I have a copy of the Twilight Zone Companion hardcover that has the signatures of, all the major writers, many of the actors and directors and producers, and that's worth a fair amount of change. So that's some of it, guys. So we'll talk to you very soon. We're busy at work on Space Command and the other projects, and there'll be lots to share with you very, very soon. Hope you're staying safe. Hope you're staying well. And thanks for being part of this wonderful, amazing life of science fiction. Take care, and we'll talk soon. Bye.